Welcome to That RPG Podcast, where every great adventure starts with a single idea. I'm DQ, your friendly neighborhood GM.
I'm Courtney, your local blood queen.
And I'm Johnny Law. You can call me Daddy. It's June, and June we did Mother's Day. That was May. So June it's Father's Day. I don't know how everyone's relationships are with their fathers. It started off weird last time. Mine's actually great. We talk all the time. He's a great guy. I hope to have him maybe on this. That'd be really interesting. He's a psychologist, so.
That would be pretty interesting.
My father is either Werner Herzog or Conan O'Brien. I've decided that a long time ago. So it's just when I get to meet them, I'll find out. I'll just get a blood test with them.
Not Jeff Goldblum.
Not Jeff Goldblum. I think he's more like my uncle.
Oh, okay.
He's like a weird uncle, I think.
You know, the trope is about fathers that they don't like to be fussed over. You know, Father's Day, they don't want to go to brunch and shit like that. They maybe play golf, sit on the couch. I don't know, whatever the
grill.
Yeah, the grill. So in that spirit, we're going to include other groups out there. Namely, we have our rainbow flag friends. We have Juneteenth. Juneteenth is coming up. It's a holiday that's finally recognized. We're including everyone in this episode because, you know what? One day it's just going to be a big melting pot and all is going to be well.
Yeah, I think that oftentimes, and especially in 2025, we don't know who's going to be at our table. In the past, in the 70s and the 80s, RPGs weren't as widespread, so they weren't accessible to everyone. But now they're accessible and they're mainstream. So, you know, we have completely different audiences to appeal to and interact with.
We're beyond the era of grognards. We're basically beyond the dad-centric era, if you will.
But dads are definitely welcome at the table. There's a guy, Triant Monk, and his tagline, he's a YouTuber. I like him a lot. His name's Chris, his real name. He always ends his thing with, I'm just going to kick back and have fun. D&D's for everyone. But anyway, I love that sentiment of that, you know, there is plenty of room table for everyone. And that being said, not every table is for everyone. So you gotta be true to yourself and decide.
We'll explore in the later segments how you can build your game to make it work that way.
All right. Well, we will save that point. So instead, let's shift to the news in our segment called Good News, everyone. So one quick subject, because it's a very interesting one and kind of refers back to OSR Plus in a cool way. Or at least I found a lot of parallels. But on May 20th, Darrington Press and the folks from Critical Role released Daggerheart. So it's been huge hype. And from what I've seen and what I've read and what I've watched, it doesn't seem to have failed the hype. Like it seems like they're coming in pretty strong with some not revolutionary ideas, but really just pulling in things that have worked and kind of putting in a nice package that's accessible for noobs to TTRPGing, but also has enough little bit crunchy elements and variation to it that some of the more hardcore people would be happy to play it. You guys checked it out as well. I believe you started looking at what were your thoughts besides the core set not having 2d12 added to it? Why wouldn't you just add cheap dice? So dumb.
I was looking when I kind of looked through the PDF, and to me it seems very much like a cross between traditional PBTA sort of games and 4E. Interestingly, you would think that those are like an antithetical combination, because 4E was very much gamified. Like it has very streamlined mechanics for monsters and play on a BTT or like on a hex map. And, you know, I think I like the idea of merging some of the PBTA principles with the trad games, because it gives you more flexibility. That's what we're trying to do, like in OSR Plus. And like you said, like sometimes the point isn't to make something completely new. Like you're not necessarily trying to reinvent the wheel. You're trying to like streamline. And for them, you know, I'm sure part of the motivation is to get away from 5e and to have their own system, because their enterprise is in making actual plays and role-playing stuff. And if they don't have to be beholden to 5e, now they can do their own thing.
It just feeds itself too. Where, you know, the more that the game sells, the more their pockets get filled and all those involved. And but going back to your saying about the themes of it, there's definitely a duality like throughout the whole game, where they have, you know, that like combat's supposed to be quick and gritty and mechanical, but then the rest of the game is supposed to focus on more narrative play. And whereas they have like these two, you know, this hope and the fear aspects that are at least throughout the actual mechanics, like it definitely seems like that's what they're going for.
Yeah, I liked that it seemed to be going for like a collaborative storytelling pathway, as opposed to like the GM is going to fight you kind of mindset. Admittedly, I'm not like as into mechanics as these gentlemen here, but just glancing through the PDF, the class options definitely felt 4E-ish to me, just even the way that they're set up on the pages. But I'm curious to look deeper. I guess one of my critiques in general of RPGs is when like they just have this massive guide that nobody's ever gonna probably read in full, or like especially not new players. I wish it was more approachable from that standpoint.
So 2 comments on both parts. The one cool thing that they did, which is also kind of brilliant from a marketing standpoint, is that they have the cards.
I do like the cards, yeah.
You're not flipping through a book. Like, you're just like, here are all your abilities. You don't have to write them down. They're all here, which, you know, OSR Plus does because it's on a fucking website and just puts it together for you. But yeah, can you imagine like the OSR Plus at home? It's just like magnets and just like build it.
I think it's smart because it lets you play. The book has in the Daggerheart, it has all the abilities in their indexes, but it's neat to be able to just hand people physical objects, because then, or like the tokens they have for building fear and hope, those pools, like the way they suggest doing it and putting tokens on your cards. It's almost like a card game that's inside of the RPG game.
Yeah, I did definitely like the card concept and the fact that they come included, because I remember playing Pathfinder, a game at some point where I ended up like trying to design my own spell cards just because I had so many spells at some point, and it was like, where do I even...
Having a hand is easier to look at, you know, than a sheet that's like super long.
And you have icons and stuff like that. And supposedly that it's all pretty well, like just even the core set is all pretty well made, like good card stock and good texture to it and whatever, which, I mean, just like those little things makes me happy, especially in this day and age. And like, you know, you guys heard how much I talked about the release of Civilization 7, not putting in the bare minimum of care to get something done right. Like, at least I'm glad to hear that that's what they did. Like, they actually did. Like, I know you're not a big fan of the artwork, but at least it like is all original art, and
it's high quality too, like the material production quality. I mean, because they have a lot of money behind it. Like, this is like not quite Cosmere money, but it's close, you know. And I mean, and I'm sure Courtney would have more to say about the art, but like my when I look at it, like if I picked up the 4E book, or I pick up any, or even the 5E book, or any similar generic fantasy book, their art is the same kind of very glossy superhero looking style, which looks nice. But to me, I feel like that's my criticism of Daggerheart, is that it doesn't seem artistic in terms of its art. It doesn't seem to project a personality that's memorable. Like, if I were to pick this up in a lineup of modern RPGs that are similar to 5e, I wouldn't be able to visually tell the difference because there's nothing distinctive about it. Although I feel like the design of the pages, like the information design as you're looking through it, it's very clean. And it was very easy for me to like flip through it, even when, in my cursory read of going through the whole book. That I think is impressive. It's hard to make a 300-page book be very clean and consistent throughout. But the art, I feel like it's very much A quality, AAA studio sort of art, but it's like, what is Daggerheart style? I don't think there is the answer to that.
Yeah, like I like the art, but I do agree that a lot of it just looks the same as what you might see in 5e or Magic the Gathering or any number of things. I will say I do really like the black and white sketch art that they have on some of the pages. I wish there was like even more of that, or I wish they brought that more into their brand. I think that could set it apart better.
So I want to get back to the other thing, but I'm going to keep touching on this because this is a really great point. I think for better or for worse, one of the things that they're trying to do is set up like this big net. And apparently their frames, which are like their little world scenarios, one is like anime, one is like Legend of Zelda, and another one is like the guy said it was like Red Dead Redemption meets Shadow of the Colossus.
I really like the frames, like they have all these settings embedded in the book.
So maybe that's why they didn't stick with one art style or like a very specific, like you're saying, like this like sketch. But I also feel like they could have done that as well.
3 did that in their books. Remember, they used to have a lot of sketch drawn arts in the 3 original manuals. Like 3 had a lot of like pages like we're seeing in Daggerheart where they were like half complete sketches and then the full quality art too. Like I feel like from 2e had a more the old romantic kind of 80s look, right? And then 3e started bringing in the style we're seeing now, but it was more sketchy and more like rough around the edges. And then it got very glossy in 4e, and now it's super glossy in 5e. But yeah, to John's point, like I feel like there could be an overall feel, and then each of the frames could have their own feel.
Change a little bit.
Yeah.
Going back to the mechanic part, one thing that really made me like almost a little warm and fuzzy inside was seeing that they have one way to use your hope tokens that you accumulate is through these 2 skills that you decide when you first create your character, which is literally just the narrative tags that we talked about in this last episode. That's feature in OSR Plus. I mean, it's not the same actually because you have to spend a resource to use it, whereas in OSR Plus you just get a use of each one every session. But it's basically the same thing. It's like, I'm a thief, so I have silent as death as my tag, and then I can use that however I want to help rolls as long as I have a hope token to back it up. And I love that idea of like it's player created. Everyone has is on the same footing, like how you do it, but the more creative you can get by both writing it and then playing it, like that's a huge thing. And it was like, oh, that's really cool that they did that. And same thing we were talking about their ancestry and their customs that you use it does a similar thing where it shapes your character, more so than you do in 5e or 5.5e or whatever.
Even their communities, like your character is part of a community, and that also gives you a tag, which I haven't seen. Like that's a smart idea. Like you have experiences that give you tags. You've got a community that gives you tag, and then your die as you're rolling stuff generate the hope or the fear, which is the resource the GM can use against you. I thought it's a very carefully designed mechanics because it's very similar to Star Wars. I think it's called FFG, the Genesis system, where in that system the die you roll, they're weird die, but when you roll them, they tell you like a variety of things, like how much you succeeded and what other complications happen. You kind of read the dice there to interpret them. And something similar is happening here in that you're rolling, you're beating a TN, but you're also generating complication at the same time, like generating the hope pool or the fear pool. And what I really like I have a gripe about initiative systems, but the one thing I do like that this system's doing, even though they disclaim that they have initiative, is that when the GM can act, they spend their fear die to just like make a move, or they spend their fear resource. So that's kind of cool because I feel like a lot of PBTA systems, they'll just say, oh, well, there's no initiative in this system. People just go whenever they want. And, everyone, it's such a great thing that there's no initiative. But my gripe with that is like, that's a bunch of nonsense. Like no matter what you do, there is a spotlight that's moving from A to B to C. And whether that spotlight's dictated by a die, it's either dictated by a die roll or some mechanic, or it's dictated by the GM just arbitrarily saying who goes next. In this system, it's saying the same thing, but if you roll and you get fear on your die, the GM can pop in, or if the GM wants to, he can spend fear to pop in. So that's kind of a cool spin on the traditional, like, there's no initiative in this system.
I think it's a very interesting argument to have, and I don't disagree with you in the slightest. Like, I feel like initiative is, I love how in OSR Plus you roll initiative with each turn. And like I like how it changes and it really like affects my mood so much when you're like, I had such a great idea, but it's cool like that. But I also like, I don't mind in 5e how it's just you're gonna go through because it's predictable, and I can just be like, all right, this is I'm always, but like I prefer the chaos because then it becomes on the fly thinking. Whereas I'm like, oh, if I'm gonna support DQ's character, like I'm before her, and I can't just hold my turn like in better games. But yeah, like it's you gotta like think of what I can do that might help you. And
yeah, I mean, it's the alternative is popcorn initiative. That's where I go and then I decide who goes next. That's what the system's doing. So like and I hand the spotlight to Bob. Bob hands it to Mary. Mary hands it back to the GM, which I don't know why they would ever do that. That's popcorn initiative.
MCDM, whatever Matt Colville's want, don't they do something like? Or they might do all one side. They roll to see which side goes first, and then one side.
Oh, they do side based.
Or it might be popcorn.
I think they do side based. But the key with popcorn, the problem with popcorn is you can have the whole party go, and then the GM goes last, and everything's killed already. That's possible to happen. It's unlikely, but that can happen. But what's cool about this system is there's a way for the GM to intervene. If you're rolling and you get fear, which is likely, then he can pop in. And he has a bucket of fear. He can decide, well, okay, Mary's about to help John. I'm going to spend my fear die to get the bad guy to come in and hit John before you can. So that's kind of cool.
It still, as a side tangent, it still baffles me that you can't hold in 5e.
I know. It makes me so mad.
You have to use your action and your reaction to hold.
My beef with it is if I do that, I'm actually penalized for going first. Because if I decide to hold my arrow and then something else happens, I got to release that arrow, right?
Yeah. Or even worse, the spell. You spend the spell slot on your turn, and then you hold. And if you can't cast it, the spell slot's gone. And like,
that's awful.
It just doesn't make sense to me. Like, going first is bad in 5e.
The only time you want to hold in 5e is when you know really good combo tactics.
Which is funny because in OSR Plus, Daniel, you hold all the time when you're playing.
Because if you got the initiative, why would you go? Why you're the point of having the initiative means you decide when you go. That's the idea. And there's downsides to that in that it makes initiative more complicated. Going back to Daggerheart though, and our theme, what this book often gets criticized for, which after having read through it, I really think the criticisms are overblown. People criticize Daggerheart because they say that it's too inclusive, that it oversteps in terms of its advice for accessibility and for managing social etiquette at the table. And I feel like after looking through it, the material it includes is a primer to the sort of full scale book she might have on accessibility and inclusion, and it doesn't really say a whole lot. It gives you some starters really, and yes, there is the war wheelchair in there, which I also think is dumb. But at least the other bits, like the advice for how to handle blindness or how to handle this or that, like those, they're only like a page or two, and then the advice for the inclusion stuff isn't very different than what you might see in the OSR Principia and the primer, or the PBTA, primers you'd see in the beginning, like be a fan of your players, all that stuff. So I think it's overblown. Like looking through it, it's nice that it has more GM advice than the average guide, but that GM advice is not unusual. Like you can find this in most of the major docs about this,
Do you think it's a problem, or do you think it became a target because you have to declare your pronouns in character creation?
Right. And I think maybe that's where it can be like annoying, but you could easily just ignore that.
No, it's not annoying. That's just normal. That's normal. It's how society has developed, that we allow people to determine that they want to be referred to a different way. Not a big deal. You make a mistake because you don't know, you should not be punished. But
what I mean by annoying is I don't think that the criticism levied at it to say that it's being didactic is fair, because I don't think it is being didactic. But if it said in the manual, like, step 4 is you must declare your pronouns, and if you don't, you're a bad person, that's where I would say it's overstepping. So just the inclusion of it is just because it's trying to be contemporary with its audience.
Yeah, I hadn't heard that criticism, but skimming through, I did notice certain things about, here's how to handle a character who's blind or who's deaf. And then the session 0 safety mechanic discussions, and they're brief blurbs. It's not like they wrote essays on theory around this. It's pretty straightforward guidance, and
it's simple versions. Like I think Fate Core has a doc or a longer document that's about accessibility that goes in depth. This is like the intro version of that. So it's it would be nice to have that in your occasional GM guide. So I don't see why that's a problem.
The last point I'd like to make about, because I really meant this to be a short bit, but it actually, as I looked into it, it did seem to reflect more on our play styles, and I was pleasantly surprised, to be honest, that because I'm not a fan of Critical Role. I'm not anti, but it's just not my thing. I don't like watching other people do stuff that I rather do myself. And I like their critical success roll. The action rolls is if you get the same number on both dice, that's critical success.
The regular die is 2d12, which is a bell curve, and the d20 is super swingy. So what they're saying is when you're fighting the enemy swings back and forth from complete success to totally sucking, which is cool. Whereas what you're doing is more reliable. So that creates, I think, depending, I haven't looked at their TNs, but if the number is usually in your favor, that makes a more heroic feeling. Like in our system, you have a very high chance of success, like a 60-70% chance on average, usually closer to 70% the average roll. Whereas in other systems, like old school OSR or PBTA, it's less than 50%. And PBTA, it's really bad. It's really low percentage, which is surprising for success at a cost.
I always found that to feel kind of punishing in a way. And I know that the idea behind it is successes with an obstacle can be more interesting.
Never run that way.
Success, but yeah, it feels like it's never quite feels like I did the thing.
Plus, with the hope and fear mechanic, it does change. So if you guys haven't read up on this, basically, as you roll 2 dice of different color, one represents hope, one that represents fear. Whatever is the higher one is the outcome. So you can still succeed, but if you succeed with fear as the higher die, then the GM gets the fear token. Vice versa, you could fail, but if your hope is the higher die of the 2 that you rolled, even though you failed, you still get a hope token.
these pools. They're kind of like mini fate points because you accumulate these pools and you can use them for different things. Like on one hand, I think you can use them to help you recover. You can use them to activate certain abilities.
You can tag team with other players. Like you can do like combo moves and stuff like that. Which I mean, it sounds like a fun, but also it's everything can be narrated, and that's the other thing that they really emphasize, which we kind of went over, is that like it talks about in session 0. Even if you're using a map, like the map places aren't really labeled. Like you'll let the player characters decide what the names of the place, what the town's like what the people are like in the town and stuff like that. It's stuff that we do very much so in OSR Plus, baked into that game, but they're bringing it. I mean, not that we started it, but they're doing it as well in, as like a core element of the game. It's like I said, it's everyone at the table is the storyteller. It's collaborative gaming.
Yeah, I did like to see that emphasized right away, like the stuff about like having players give input to the scenes that you enter into, which Daniel, you've done in a lot of sessions. You'll ask us like what we see in a place or what things look like, which I always like doing.
Mm-hmm. It makes it part of us.
And the other thing I liked too is one last thing, because we mentioned frames, which I think is a really cool way to have a bunch of biomes basically to play in. Their environment cards are cool. Like it's like basically if you took layer actions and you treated them like they were a character, and so they have these environments where you can say, well, we're going to put you in this polar ice cave environment, and it's got all these stats and these ways that it interacts with other mechanics. That's pretty innovative, because now as a GM, I can say, all right, I'm going to take these monsters, use the system they have for building the encounter, and then I'm going to take this environment card, and now you add this level of interest to it.
Well, I was going to say, speaking of great scenes, I hope all those watching this have watched Andor season 2, because why wouldn't you have watched Andor season 2? But no, I'm kidding. If you haven't watched Andor at all, it's a fantastic show, even if you're not a Star Wars fan.
Yes. Yeah, I've been watching season 1. I'm not done with it yet. It's just a totally different feel than the previous Star Wars stuff, which just felt very, I don't know, goofy or like I wasn't going to say it, but there's just like, it approaches the setting with a different sense of gravity, maybe. Like things are a lot more morally ambiguous, perhaps.
Grittier, for sure.
Grittier, yeah. No, I'm liking it a lot. The characters are all fascinating. Like even the ones that are the villains and they're evil, but it's still like, oh, they're really interesting and I want to see them on screen more.
You want to root for them, strangely, too, yeah.
I don't know about that.
You'll get there. Give it time. You will start rooting for Dedra, because one of the moments, I don't know how far you are, what she's been doing so far, but like there are moments when she's fighting against her own, like her system that she's inside of, and she's more competent than the system, and you're like, I hope she succeeds because those guys suck and she's better than them, right? So then you're empathizing with the villain, with the Nazi, she's a literal Nazi.
Yeah,
basically.
Nazi.
And and avoiding spoilers, but there's a lot of scenes where it becomes very apparent that even though the Empire is a well-oiled machine, none of the people within it trust each other. So they're all vying for company, trying to get seen, trying to progress and whatever, or like backstabbing. Whereas the rebellion that's trying to form are pockets all over the place. When it comes down to it, they can bond together.
I mean, it reminds me of the Foundation series. The one of the principal ideas in it, is Asimov, I believe, right? In that is that I think it's called Trantor, is the home world of the Empire in that story, and he talks about how it's become so large that it's impossible to manage components of the Empire because of its reach, and that's what Star Wars is saying, the same thing, but it's never depicted it. But in Andor, we're seeing how that functions, how that works,
Yeah, I love seeing the bureaucracy right from the start in like the sort of, I don't know, not even just incompetence of people on the ground, but people are too afraid to say something because they don't want to get punished or they don't want to go out of their way. They don't want to put the extra work in. So there's all this like internal butting of heads that's really interesting to see.
Partagast is such an interesting character. The old guy who's like he's the main boss of Dedra, and he addresses the ISB.
Yes,
council.
yeah.
Like he's such an interesting character because he's almost aware of the difficulties of managing the Empire and who you need to appease and how you survive. So it's like, and as you go through the story, this isn't a spoiler, but there's more of a relationship between Dedra and him, and you get more of an insight into how you have to politic your way through the Empire, which in the past, the Empire was like a bunch of stormtroopers and Vader and an evil wizard.
And you had some like generals or commanders in there, but nobody really like.
They just got strangled. That was the whole.
Yeah, that was their entire purpose. Was to get
The
strangled.
role was to get strangled.
Yeah.
One of the reasons why I think we're reacting so positively to Andor is think back to when Batman Begins first came out, or to when Lord of the Rings first came out, the movies. Like prior to Lord of the Rings, all we had as far as fantasy movies were concerned were schlocky 80s films that didn't take fantasy seriously. It wasn't like, this is a serious universe that we're in that has real consequences, and there are people here that have fully realized lives. Same thing with Batman Begins. Prior to that, we had the fourth Batman movie that was ridiculous and stupid, like, and it had George Clooney as Batman.
We had like the nipple outfit and Schwarzenegger as.
Yeah, we didn't have a real gritty take on Batman where it's like, even not necessarily gritty, but the idea is like, this is what it would be like if it was a real world situation. That's what Andor does, I think, to Star Wars.
Oh, and it makes the rebellion too like more morally questionable, which I like a lot, because in the movies it's always very much good versus evil, very clear who's where, and I like when there's a bit of nuance to how people act and the sacrifices that people are willing to make or not make. It all ends up being very interesting, and even small things that characters do that kind of get glossed over. It's like, oh, that's not really a morally upstanding choice, but it was like the right choice in the moment. Yeah, I think for this month's pop culture corner, we could talk about the ethos alignments of some of the characters in there.
Courtney, would you like to explain what ethos is?
Ethos is kind of OSR Plus's take on the classic D&D alignment chart, but takes it into a more realistic, nuanced direction, as opposed to like good versus evil. There's altruism and egoism, and then instead of law and chaos, there's faith and brave, and then like different combinations within that.
Yeah, like my goal in it was to separate out evil and good, because when people talk about evil and good, they have so many different definitions of what that means. And in the original D&D, there wasn't really consensus as to what that means either. So instead, as a GM, you decide, is the game we're playing, are the good guys altruistic? Are they people who are willing to sacrifice for others? Or are the good guys like pirates? Are they selfish and trying to make money, and that's really what's good for them? So you can set up the duality how you want, right? When you set the game up, and then the players can think in those terms. Whereas like when you're thinking about justice, when you have faith and brave, if you're faithful, you're acting on principle. You have a faith to your principles. If you're brave, you're caring about consequences. What's the outcome? That's what's most important to you. So what I found is in analyzing the original alignments, like you can create these 9 ethos that are combinations of all these things.
What characters? I mean, we got to talk about Andor, obviously.
I mean, the one thing I would add, before we talk about it too, is that when we think about like D&D's alignments, each of those we have very deeply ingrained, those of us who played D&D and spent time and seen these alignment charts in the past, deeply ingrained idea of what these things mean. And the problem is everyone has a different idea in their head as to what it means. So the whole point of this ethos system was to really give you definitions to them so we could talk about them in a meaningful way, as opposed to people arguing with each other like, well, that's not what a neutral evil person would do, because in my mind, neutral evil means XYZ. Well, in this case, in this system, we've created very specific meaning to what these things are, but
we're still able to argue over them.
But it's not equivocation, because without these definitions, you're arguing about different definitions. You're never going to arrive at a point. You can never like really get anywhere. But I feel like with this, you can.
Yeah. So starting with Andor, I guess since he's the title character, we might as well start with him. He's an interesting guy, and I still haven't quite figured out where he's coming from. I don't know. He's made a lot of interesting actions so far from what I've seen. Starting right in the first episode, in the very beginning, his choice to act a certain way towards these corpo like security people, which sets the whole thing in motion. But I feel like he wavers for me.
So if you break it down, like you could break it down by the 2 axes, right? Like, would you say, at least in the word from what you've been watching so far, Is he more interested in altruism or egoism, or is he in between the two?
I think he's in between the two.
And then when it comes to like his feelings on justice, does he tend to operate from principles or from consequences right now?
I don't know. I don't know exactly. I feel like he definitely has his own principles, but I don't know if he focuses solely on those or on consequences.
I 100% think it's the latter. I think he and I don't disagree. He has his own honor code for sure, and his own feeling of what's right or wrong. And I would also say that I feel like he's quite altruistic in a lot of ways with the people that are close to him, but not in the grand scheme. So 100% radical for me. Like, not at least in the start of the show, he's a radical. I think he changes. I won't say how, and it's not. I don't think you could probably figure out, but maybe you can't. I don't know. Maybe it's but I think he does change a little bit. But in the beginning of the show and throughout majority of it, he is more of a radical. He's like almost
He's searching for his sister, right, in the beginning.
At the start, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Which is selfish in a way,
right?
To be honest.
And when it means that the actions he's taken is he's doing things to the tune of his own drum, right? Like, which is what benefits him in finding his sister. So he's not really super interested in like in a big idea of altruism or selfishness.
Yeah.
Rebel Alliance.
Yeah, so radicals are brave skeptics. They don't believe in a duty to help others or derive pleasure from gaining power. Instead, their motivations are often far more personal. What one believes is a good or evil action, the radical argues, always depends on the circumstances of one's culture and the laws of one's society.
And radical is chaotic neutral.
Effectively, yeah.
That's like a brave skeptic.
Brave skeptic, yeah.
But I think even in season 1, he tends to move. You see little acts of kindness to people he wouldn't necessarily have to, and I think that's because underneath that there is a need that he feels like caring about others matters to him, and there's certain principles that start to like come up over time. I think that moves him towards the middle of the season towards a benefactor, someone who is interested in helping where he can. But he doesn't feel he's beholden to a big concept of like the greater good of the rebellion yet.
Benefactors are balanced altruists, which the equivalent would be like neutral good. They're not committed to moral absolutism and don't believe that the actions of individuals can be justified by cultural difference. Instead, they believe a balance of both viewpoints is necessary to maintain moral fitness in society. So I could see him kind of going in that way.
And I feel like he'd be more of a champion in the long run of things. Once again, not going into spoilers. So Rogue One, I feel like he regresses. Well, he kills a guy in the very beginning because the guy's is gonna fuck up the mission.
But I mean, like, if he's killing someone under the pretense of the mission, he's doing it because he has to protect the greater good of the mission.
Yeah.
That being said, that he has it's not a tough decision to make.
Right.
Literally, like, he's like, we gotta get out of here, and the guy's like, I hurt my leg. He goes, beep. Like,
I feel like he's more like Luthen in Rogue One, right?
Exactly.
It's almost like they made it make sense in reverse, right? Like, they saw how he was in Rogue One. They're like, how do we get him to be like this?
If you were to go into OSR Plus and make an Andor character, he would be a radical. I think this is what our ultimate goal should be. So if you at home watching or on your phone in a subway, please don't have earphones or something like that. Have earphones and don't just be playing loud. It's a fucking dick move. Anyway, but if you are watching along, if you want to go to osrplus.com and just go to a little search bar on the upper left and put in Ethos, you'll see a bunch of page drop, and you can just go and look at this and be like, oh, fuck. This is great. And then you can just make a quick free account and you can make your own character and you can make Andor.
Well, we did mention Luthen, who is your favorite character, Courtney, right?
So far, yeah, I'm a big fan of him. I would definitely put him in the category of champion, so brave altruist. They oppose absolutism and have no qualms upsetting the status quo to free the innocent from oppression and exploitation. They have great respect for diversity, tolerate differing ethical viewpoints, and strive to generate the most good for the most people. He makes a lot of tough decisions that maybe aren't good for everybody, but in like his long plan, they will be good for everybody for the most part, which I think very much fits. And I think like seeing a character like that portrayed in media is pretty interesting to me, because oftentimes like rebel factions in general in media are portrayed as like these really heroic, valiant types. And this goes into like more of like, gotta be willing to have people get hurt and die in order for a revolution to take place. Basically, it kind of brushes aside the notion that like freedom fighters are all about the freedom and not so much the fighting. It very much brings in like actual just acts of terrorism, pretty much, to get your goals done.
So Courtney, you say Luthen as a champion. I got there at a point that I do agree with you. I think that also, not doing spoilers, but as he develops more as a character and as you learn more about his whole story, I think he is a champion at heart. But if I was making the Luthen character, mastermind, hands down.
Interesting.
Hands down, no question about it.
So is your argument that he's not really doing things for the greater good, it's to fulfill his own selfish intents?
So masterminds are faithful egoists. They are cunning egoists who believe that altruism as a philosophy is groundless. According to the mastermind, people always act out of self-interest, even when they are ostensibly helping others.
So he constantly is giving off this vibe of, no, this is the job that needs to be done. This is not, we're not sure he's not doing it for the greater of the Republic. He is, but he's doing it at the behest of taking down the Empire. That's his main goal. And that's why, skirting any spoilers, the other factions don't see him as.
So you read him as he's so obsessed that he's actually self-interested.
Yes, he's got blinders on.
That's how you see it. I can see that argument.
And I do feel like there are things throughout the series that go against that argument. Like, but no one's world's not black and white. Like, it's not, you can have fluctuations or whatever.
I could see that throughout. There's a danger of falling into that, like to that ethos, in the sense that like he loses sight of what he's actually doing. And maybe there might have been moments in his career where that happened. That's why people don't trust him as much. But I feel like, no spoilers, of course, I feel like as the series progresses and we get towards its fantastical conclusions, my feelings about him being a champion are like validated.
I 100% agree. I'm glad that Courtney opened up a champion from her perspective early on in the series, or not, early on, but less than halfway through. And like, cause I was like, fuck, but it's so masterminds, for those watching, don't have no clue about, OSR Plus, it's lawful evil, and champion is chaotic good. So literally polar opposites on the actual.
And you see how we can actually talk about the specifics, right? Like we can give reasons why we think this is the case, as opposed to if we were just talking about lawful evil and chaotic good, there's no definitions for them that anyone can agree on.
One other quick argument for mastermind. So we've talked about tags about your flaws and your conflicts and your flaws, just say them in the right order, on our last episode, which are ways that players can add a +2 to their rolls, or the GM can do a -2, or sometimes the players do a -2 using their flaw for reasons. One of those reasons is get a fate point, which is just a magical thing that lets you do crazy take over the narrative, or explode a die, or all sorts of stuff. Go to the website, read it. It's delicious. But one of the ways that you can get a fate point every session, and you only get at the end of the session, you got to argue for it, but is by acting to your ethos tag. And that's whatever alignment that you picked, that's you do something that works within those confines. And so the ethos tag for mastermind reads as, you make it easier for others like yourself to get ahead, even if it puts you at risk of being exposed. And my argument for Luthen is that he does it for Andor. He does it, well, I'm not gonna say anymore because it gets later in other characters, but he's trying to progress his agenda.
Mm-hmm.
And he'll put other people at risk, not necessarily just himself. Like, I don't think he hides behind things, but I think he puts other things. But you got to wag of the finger.
Counterpoint. Yes. The champion's ethos tag is you break the rules in order to help the most people you can, even if it means dire consequences for all involved.
100%. Yeah, I cannot argue with that.
I love the reads, though, because it's like you could do a close reading either way. Obviously I'm biased and I feel strongly, and so everyone I think will all feel strongly at the end about one or the other. But I think if you look at slices of it, you could do a close read and try to build it that way,
And it's the beauty of the show too, is that we know he's a good guy, we know he's flawed, we know he's not the good guy in the show. It's not like we're it's not an irony kind of thing that we're seeing as the audience, but I do, as I said, I feel like he kind of fluctuates between those two, and it's very,
or at least the audience doesn't know his interior motive. So we only know what he says. Like there's no interior narration. So we have to assume, we have to infer, what his actions mean.
And what we've seen.
And trust him. Like there's moments in this moment, there's no spoilers, moments when characters who are close to him begin to doubt his motives.
It's also interesting just the fact that I feel like in D&D, if you were to talk about a chaotic good character wavering into lawful evil, that you'd be like, that makes no sense. They're complete literal polar opposites there. Like that doesn't work at all. But in this system, you can kind of see it.
And to give us the other parallels, like, at certain points, Vader is lawful evil or a mastermind because he unlike the Emperor, I think, actually believes that there is an empire to rule over and a way to do things, and he believes in Sith philosophy, right? Like he says to Luke, join me so we can rule together. He wants to elevate Luke to his thinking, whereas the Emperor is just a cackling maniac who wants unlimited power. So there you've got your megalomaniac versus your mastermind, someone with a vision and principles and wants to elevate others to this way of thinking about your own self-interest versus someone who says, everyone, I just want to have maximum benefit to myself. So, speaking of masterminds, Dedra is another character in the show who is an ISB agent who is up and coming and becomes more and more competent as things go along. She has her failures here and there, but she's kind of like your, I don't know if I could say like your I think I texted to you like an incel autist. Can I say that? Is that okay to say? No, I'm gonna take it for take. Is fair? She's kind of incelish,
How is she incelish?
She just gives off. She doesn't.
Yeah.
She has like no warmth to her. She's just like this
she's
cold.
icy. Yeah.
Yeah. She's
a bit Lilith, which from
which I'm into.
Cheers, which you're into. Really. Yeah, you have a type.
Yeah, but getting back to Dedra, like we know why she is. Later, they give explanations late in season 2 why she is the way she is. But from my read on Dedra is she really believes in the mission of the Empire. She really believes that the Empire is here to create law and order in the universe, and that the more work she does, the more she can benefit those who believe in her mission, and they'll all work together to rise to this level, the standard of imperial rule. And when we learn more about her, we know why. But I think she is purely the definition of a mastermind. Like she is an egoist in the sense that she doesn't care about the welfare of the people. She cares about herself and those who agree with her way of thinking. And she is extremely principled. Like she's willing to break certain rules, but because she thinks they're violating the principles that the Empire stands for. And I think, we find out to her folly how that unfolds later on without getting into spoilers. But I think like if we ever had someone who you can predict how she will behave, it's Dedra, because she operates with a well-oiled machine of what the Empire believes.
Counterpoint.
Yeah.
She does not follow the rules.
Well, I did mention that.
You didn't mention it, but I'm just saying she's constantly breaking the rules.
Yeah. But I think there's a difference between rules and principles, though.
But no, but here's the thing, though. She thinks she's doing it for the greater good of the Empire. So she thinks the Empire is altruistic in its own way. But she's called out in ways for this behavior. And even though she reads on surface level, oh, she's a good up and coming Imperial officer. No, because she doesn't stay in her lane.
Well, I think wouldn't you say though that's for her bucking against bureaucracy? Like she thinks that the bureaucracy is inefficient.
Shifts her over to at least skeptical, if not brave.
But I think that's a confusion of law, literal law, versus principles. Like her and Partagaz, they share the same principles. Partagaz is better at following the rules.
Compare her and Cyril.
Cyril's adjudicator, yeah.
I think adjudicator is someone who isn't so much interested in altruism or egotism. He's not doing it because he's trying to benefit people or to glorify himself. Although I think it can be argued he is trying to do that. but he really cares about the law in which he's operating, law with a capital L, which in this case is imperial rule. He thinks that the way you can build a good society is executing all the laws properly. But I think the difference here is that we see him change because he realizes that those rules aren't what they seem. The more he follows them, the more it breaks apart. Whereas Dedra, I feel like she really does believe in what the Empire is trying to accomplish. She just thinks that she's being held down by people less competent than her. And Partagaz is better at playing the game, and she's not as good at playing the game as he is.
Partagaz is a mastermind, 100%. He's 100% mastermind. He knows the rule of law, and he knows how to play it. So my thing though is with Cyril is that his upbringing, and this could be mild spoilers, but it's not like story spoilers.
Well, you've met his mother.
she's
But he is like has Imperial action figures. He grew up like, oh, this is the Empire. This is the way to be.
I mean, the same is true for Dedra.
No,
it absolutely is.
No, she didn't.
Think about where she came from. But she explained when she talks about that. She explains that's why she believes.
If you take it for how she ends up and what she realizes and what she becomes in the long run, or maybe she dies, I don't know. It's the exact opposite. Her whole life is a lie.
I don't think she would believe that even in her final outcome. I think she's a true believer. Just to back up, my ultimate conclusion here is I think if I were maybe the Emperor, like I say I'm the Emperor, I don't really believe in the Empire's mission. I'm a total opposite. All I care about is my power, right? But I do need loyal officers to serve me. I would absolutely choose Dedra because more so than Partagaz even or Krennic, they're people who are willing to operate out of their own self-interest and screw over my plans. Whereas I think she will go to the end in serving my goals.
I'm not saying anything, but you're wrong.
Yeah, she's definitely a tough one to pin down because so far for me, she fits into Mastermind. And part of the reason why I say that is their tag, you make it easier for others like yourself to get ahead, even if it puts you at risk of being exposed. And she does take kind of risky moves to like find out the things that she needs to find out.
And she elevates Cyril.
Yeah.
She uses them. It's not a healthy relationship.
Well, of course.
Spoilers. I don't know that they hook up yet, but yeah, I saw they're awkward. I told Daniel it was like, wow, lawful evil flirtations are the most awkward thing to watch. I was just like, I was stalking you, and she's like, yeah.
I like
it. I will say Cyril is absolutely a Judicator, and I've played a couple of those, and he's definitely fits the bill. So Judicators are faithful skeptics. They are neither selfless nor egotistical in their disposition. To the Judicator, what is ethical is what is lawful, and so ethical judgments are inseparable from culture and society, which that is 1,000% 100%. Cyril. Yeah.
What's the tag on Adjudicator?
You do what must be done according to the dictates of your religion or creed at great risk to your life or reputation, which
yeah, I think there's absolutely it's a full agreement across the board here.
He's someone who, like, as you were talking about his like background, like his mother and all that, he's someone who I feel like if the right things happened to him, he wouldn't be as a fanatical maniac that he is, because like he's someone who's very devoted to a cause. I mean, to use a Star Wars like metaphor here, the prequels, right? Like, there's the idea of like, well, from my perspective, the Jedi are evil, right? So if you think about the Jedi, if we want to think of altruism as being evil in the universe, then that would mean an oppressive kind of super communist setup where you're forced to give up your own welfare, your own ability to get better, your own wealth and everything to others, and it's forced upon you and it's oppressive. That would be a characterization of altruism as evil. So if we said that the Sith are the heroes for the prequels, they're heroes because they're able to pursue their own interests, and this makes them powerful, and they're able to overcome an oppressive government, which is the Jedi Order, right?
The whole Sith code is breaking your chains, and the whole Jedi code is I don't get to have fun.
Right. So from there, that's what that means from my perspective. So if you're going to read the prequels, if you're going to run the prequel game where everyone is going to play Sith and the Jedi are these totalitarian communists, right? Then now if you're going to run characters that are masterminds and megalomaniacs and Asurians, those are your heroes, because egoism is the heroism of this universe. Like if you're going to play a bunch of pirates who have to steal and defeat, the British Empire that's oppressing us, we're out for our own interests, but that's a good thing in this universe. That's how you can think about it.
Shifting to something a little simpler, I think that hopefully we all agree on this. Maybe we don't. I mean, we'll see. Mon Mothma, I think, is just straight up benefactor. I think whether you look at her from a neutral good perspective or from the ethos of benefactor, I definitely feel like she's in that middle column, and that she understands that the system is not correct, but she's not rebelling against the system. She's trying to work within the system, and she's trying to just spread the most good that she can. She doesn't want to know the dirty details. She doesn't want to, but she's also not going to completely kowtow. But she's a diplomat. That's her job. That's how she maneuvers. I feel like DQ has something that he really wants to say, but so I will yield the rest of my time to the chairwoman.
I would argue that she is another kind of champion.
Okay.
Because Luthen is the sort of champion who's on the ground, people have to die to do what he wants to accomplish, the greater good that he wants to accomplish. Mon Mothma's doing the same sort of work, but she's doing it in the Senate. So she's putting herself at risk in the sense that she has to be the dog who is bucking against everyone else's opinions. But at the end of the day, when she establishes this fund to fund the rebellion, like, she's doing it because she believes in altruism. She believes that the greater good of the galaxy is if everyone can look out for their own welfare. I think she's committed to that idea, but she does it in a different way than Luthen. But where I think she's more she has more trepidation about it than Luthen, and I think she's not as far along. It could be that, to your point, it could be that even before Andor starts, maybe she is a benefactor and she sees things are going dark and she's not committed to the rebellion. But then when things get shitty and she's like, all right, I'm going to set up this fund, I'm going to start becoming a champion. Maybe at the beginning she's becoming a champion.
I would agree with that, because I definitely feel like, once again, avoiding spoilers, but I do feel like she definitely ends up more towards the champion zone.
And she has fear about everything that's happening.
Yeah, but she comes from a privileged life, and she her hardships are like, oh, I got to marry off my daughter to a political marriage.
And she makes some certain sacrifices, right? That I won't talk about, that makes her question, oh, am I just like Luthen? But I would argue she is just like Luthen. She's just doing it in a different way than he is.
Interesting. I kind of agreed with benefactor, but I was also curious about guardian with her. And guardians are faithful altruists. They're stalwart altruists who believe there are universal, immutable ethical laws that transcend culture, selflessly strive to protect the innocent against oppression, regardless of the consequences.
I think she wants to be a guardian.
Yeah. The guardian tag is you refuse to violate your moral code, even if it means putting yourself or others in danger. I don't know. I could kind of see it going different ways. I'm open to any of the altruistic paths for her, though.
I agree, Courtney. I think starting on and where I feel like she maybe go actually from start before the show, benefactor, move into guardian. That's her ideal. But then she realizes what's happened. She just keeps going through that wall and comes in on the other side as champion.
Yeah, that's an interesting progression. I like that, because it shows, I think, that she wants to be a guardian, and that would be the ideal way to do things.
She wants the rule of law to win in the long run. So that's why she's funding this, but not getting involved. She's not, but then stop there. But just gets more complicated, we'll put it that way, and her life becomes more complicated in general, and she's got I really like that. That's an interesting take.
I think that what the really good point about Andor is we see characters with nuance evolve. So all of the things we pointed out, I think, are valid readings at certain points in the story.
Yeah. Or from certain perspectives too.
We talked a lot about ethos and the consequences of being a bastard. And so, how do you not be a bastard at your table? Well, we have an anonymous submitter who has some questions about safety tools. So in this Dear GM segment, our submitter asks, how do I use safety tools in my games to make sure new players feel welcome at my table? When we're dealing with people at our table, we know them pretty well, and we generally don't have to go through a formal procedure to socially onboard them. And a lot of what we do in session 0, as far as the genre and the material that we're playing is concerned, automatically accounts for expectations about what we're going to play. But if you have unknowns at your table, people that you don't know as well, or maybe you're playing with total strangers, there are tools you can use to make sure your table is safer, or you won't run into these social hiccups and conflicts at the table, or alienate someone accidentally. And I don't use a lot of these, but I can go through the sort of safety tools that are out there. The one that I like to talk about is the concept of a writer's room. If you're, I haven't worked on a television show or something like that, but I have been in writing groups and my background is writing. And when you're in a writer's room and you're trying to brainstorm a concept, or maybe you're editing something with your friends or other writers, you have to give everyone a lot of leeway to speak freely without judgment, and give them the assumption that they're not trying to act maliciously in what they're saying. They're trying to correct things and edit things and fix things. So they need to be able to speak freely so they're not feeling muzzled for fear of saying the wrong thing. So I think the same thing is true in a role-playing game table. We're all essentially writing a story on the fly with each other, mediated by these rules. And we don't know what we're going to say next because it's all improv. And we're not improv actors, so we don't really know how to control ourselves as easily. So you got to give people the benefit of the doubt. So when something gets said that maybe it was out of line or maybe it went too far, you pause and say, all right, that was too far. I'm going to rephrase it. I'm going to back up and redo that. Or you just, say, oh, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to say that. Give people that kind of breathing room. That's what the writer's room is all about. It shouldn't be this cloud of silence, for fear of what you might say.
Which I think is something that's not brought up ever. I've never seen it. I mean, I don't go deep into, looking what the safety tools are for a table, but I think it's the idea of not just trying to go out and point the finger and be right. And there's a saying that, a table should be for everyone, but not every table's for everyone. That's a thing. But it's more obviously you have a bunch of Nazis at a table. Yeah, you could be like, you're wrong, you're a piece of shit.
I mean, if you're going to play with a bunch of Nazis and you're a Nazi, go play at your table.
Stephen Miller, I'm not playing with you. You go hang out with Bannon. You fucking piece of shit.
The table, there's a certain majority thinking to the table is what you're getting at. If everyone here wants to be really strict and make everything very sanitized and very, I'm using kind of negative terminology here. You can go that way, or you can be totally loose, Gen X kind of gallows humor. That also works too, as long as everyone's on the same page about the writer's room.
If someone's like, hey, that's not cool, take a pause. But it's at the same time you say, hey, that's not cool. You don't say, you, that's offensive and you're a piece of shit, whatever, unless they're a Nazi, then they are a piece of shit.
Yeah, you gotta be willing to give and receive the feedback without impugning the person's character. That's part of what the writer's room is about.
Yeah, I feel like it's also just gauging the severity of whatever happened. Like I have after a game before spoken to or mentioned to a GM hey, that word you used one time at the start of the session is kind of a slur. It's not commonly known that it is, but it is, just FYI. And I'd wanted to approach it in that way after the game because it wasn't really a big issue. And I didn't want to be wait a second, you said this word, it's bad. And I don't care if you didn't know it was bad, but it is.
That's the editorial part of it, right? You're editing after the fact, and now we can go forward knowing that and resetting our table. That's more of that's not necessarily a tool as it is a mentality.
If someone was to have a major problem with something that the GM said, or say just something that makes them uncomfortable that the GM wouldn't know about, and they're not trying to chastise GM, but they're I'm very uncomfortable at the table. What's the best way to handle that, you think?
Well, so there's a number of ways you could approach that. These things are kind of things you want to set up in advance, which you could also make part of session 0. For example, there's a tool called Flags, where you discuss in advance, or you don't have to do it this way, but you could say that at any moment, if there is something that is problematic for you in some way that you just really can't deal with at the table, you can raise a flag. And you don't have to say why it is the case. You just have to identify what it is that's going on that you don't want to engage with. And then the GM knows, without having to compromise your privacy, to shift the narrative so it doesn't include that. So those are flags. That's one thing to have at your disposal. Another one that's popular is called lines and veils. So this has to be done in advance as opposed to a flag being used on the fly. So the flag is passive and the GM is letting the player signal them. Lines and veils are proactive. So in advance, you'd say, well, what are the lines or the things that we are not allowed to depict or even discuss? So as a table, you decide, oh, we're not going to do genocide or rape isn't on the table or any, the things that usually you would not depict. You're just confirming those things, right? And then veils are stuff that if it is depicted, we're going to put it in the background. It's going to fade to black. It's discussed in the background. It's not actively played out. So that takes work in setting up in advance. You can do things like content ratings. Say we're going to play a G-rated game. We're going to play an R-rated game. We're going to play an X-rated game. So everyone's on board with what sort of stuff might come up. things you have to decide. These are all decisions in the beginning. PvP, is it on the table or not? And then the last two things are other tools you can use in play. These are more passive ones. So one is called script changes, which means that if something happens that requires processing emotionally or psychologically, the players can say, oh, I want to do a script change. Let's rewind and redo that. Or let's fast forward past that. So that way you can control, like the experience and gloss over problems or fade to black. Yeah. So you're kind of like speeding or bypassing the problem. And then the last one, this one I'm not a fan of, is at the end of a session. It's called Roses and Thorns, where you point out things that were positive, things that were negative experiences, and things that were new insights. I don't like that one because to me, it codes too much like a post-therapy session, and I'm not here to mediate your emotional welfare. Like, that's your problem. But if you want to do that, you certainly can. But role-playing is not a therapy session. I'm happy to say that. Like, you can play it that way, but for me, it's not a therapy session. And then, of course, take breaks in between. So those are tools that you can use. Just setting the table for our discussion.
Yeah, like jumping off of the breaks is what I wanted to touch on too. Is like, I think if I ever had an issue in the middle of a game that was like just really impactful or something, I would probably wait until I might like DM send a message to the GM privately, or like wait until there's a break, like everybody kind of goes off for 5 minutes, refills their drinks, or until the end of the session to be like, hey, this wasn't the best, because it can be sort of uncomfortable to dive into that right at the table when everybody's around. It can also just be helpful to see where stuff goes. Like sometimes something might happen that might rub you the wrong way initially, but maybe it gets handled properly in the end. I feel like it's always good to kind of see where things are heading. Daniel, like you said, like giving people the benefit of the doubt and not immediately assuming the worst. If you encounter a really racist NPC, like maybe it's just the NPC is supposed to be a person, and it's not the GM like putting those views out there.
DQ, you as not only a GM, but also as someone who runs a community, you're really good about not making people be in the spotlight. So if you're like, hey, everyone, can we push this back half an hour or something like that? It's our start time. Please do not answer here. DM me only if it's okay, or if you have a problem. So that way it's not like I'm like, yep, it's fine. And they're like, well, it got canceled. It wasn't John, that's for sure. Yeah, those extra steps are the most important. Like, it's really to make people feel like they can act honestly. You don't want to sit through 3 to whatever hours that you're playing where you're uncomfortable and not happy to be there. Like, why would you do that? You're there for everyone else. No, they can NPC you. Just set it out. It's fine. Don't push yourself for no reason.
So what I try to do is like anonymize problems at the table. If there's just 4 of you, like no one needs to know why the game was canceled because so-and-so had some obligation that came up last. Doesn't matter.
And if the person who has to cancel doesn't care, they can just announce it.
Because everyone set aside the time, to do it. We've got to remember that we're all adults. We've set aside the time to do this. We're trying to have fun together.
Same thing. You're running late. Say it to the group. Don't say it to the GM, because then the GM has to tell everyone else that they're running. They're already doing too much. There is personal accountability, is what I'm trying to say. There is that always. But if it's something that's out of your power, you literally can't control, then it's so much nicer when it can be anonymous and it's not that extra stress isn't added to what you're already dealing with.
Yeah, like the anonymous factor too is why I kind of bristle at the idea of the roses and thorns, like feedback session at the end, where I'm all for telling the GM what I thought of a session, but I'll do it in like a private message or like just a one-on-one chat. I wouldn't want myself or anybody else to be put on the spot to like come up with a good thing in the session or like something that they'd want to improve or whatever. I think it can just lead to some awkward situations.
Where I could see it working really well is paid GMs.
Yeah.
Because there's a different dynamic. I mean, that makes sense. I mean, the other thing we have to talk about too, I feel like there's the inclusion part of it. A large part of inclusion is handling players who have a need for accessibility. And we dealt with this. Like I had a player who was blind in one of our games, and in fact, the original God Beyond the Portal had her. And it's fun that when you're playing that game together, and we did this remotely, some of the players in the beginning didn't even realize she was blind. in order to set that up to make that successful, there's a few things we did in advance. Like I wanted to make sure she had the same experience that others had, because we don't use digital dice, we use physical dice. So we got her braille dice so she could feel, do an actual roll and feel the roll. Other things we did is, once everyone realized the player is blind at this table, guys, they cannot see the visuals. We deliberately didn't rely on visuals to run the game, or if there was a visual, it was deeply narrated. And we did this in Magic University too, in that too, where that was the case where they didn't realize she was blind. So I would say, like, the reason why I'm having you describe the picture I just put up is so that she can understand what's there. That's basic stuff. And then, other things, the tools you use need to be accessible. And that's the toughest part, because a lot of the time the tools aren't, or you can't easily make them accessible. If you're not sure, about how to interact with someone who has certain needs that need to be met in order to be able to function in the game, there is, or how you want to depict things like disability or accessibility in the game, fictionally. I mentioned the Fate Accessibility Toolkit's a good booklet that covers that. It gives you like a play-by-play of what to do. That's one way to go about it. Then, like, if you socialize with this person out in real life, and they're a person to you, and they're a friend, they're a person. Think about them in that sense. Like, ask them, "You're blind. What can I do to make this work for you?" Maybe they are in the alphabet mafia that we talked about earlier, right? And you want to make sure they're addressed properly and that they're treated correctly. Ask them what they want instead of just trying to create these anonymous systems. Take them aside and say, "Look, how should I refer to you?" Or, "Look, what should I avoid talking about in your situation, your case?"
I would like to add to this that I'm not a guardian, so that's a caveat I'm putting out. But DQ, you went above and beyond with way of creating Word docs to help that person and whatever. And I was in that first game, and I was like, why is he explaining all the pictures so like thoroughly? And then eventually I knew that there was a blind player in our community, and I was like, oh. But I will say that obviously great tools to know, and look after your friends too. But if it is strangers and it's something that's beyond your control to handle, you're not a licensed, therapist or social worker or a caretaker. Like, there's so much you can do without driving yourself crazy. And what DQ did was above and beyond and very admirable. And like the Braille dice thing is amazing.
They were cool, those Braille dice.
I think you going back to our ethos table, you could think there's some selfish aspects to it because you wanted to be able to learn how to do that better to make your system better, which, I mean, but that goes back to you being an altruist.
That's the whole Ayn Rand discussion. Like, can anyone actually be an altruist? But that's
you doing good makes you feel good. So
right. So you just,
But like I would just say though, that it's like you can't fix every problem. The only thing you can always do is to try to address it and try to be open to it, and be curious, not judgmental, and have an openness to alternate ways of doing things. And I think that's like the big thing. Just don't be empathetic and be welcoming.
If all your players are Nazis and you're a Nazi, you're not going to bring to your table someone who's not a Nazi. It's not going to work, right? Majority rules in that case.
I was going to say too, like, also being mindful of mental health and neurodevelopmental stuff. If you are used to playing, 6-hour long games, but somebody at your table is like, "Hey, I have ADHD. I literally cannot be at a table that long," then like build in breaks. And I'm sure everybody at your table will appreciate having breaks once in a while, because some people play way too long. But just stuff like that. Or like if somebody is just not having a good mental health day and they tell you as a GM, don't like guilt them about feeling like mentally, because that's just going to make them feel worse if you like try to guilt them for not feeling well enough to play.
The big part of accommodation is, accommodate, like John was saying, as best as you can when within reason. At the end of the day, if there's an odd player out and whether through no fault of your own or their own, you can't accommodate them, then they're not the table for you. There's other tables out there. The other thing I would talk about in this realm too is in depicting things in your game, like in the fiction itself, there is room to create a sense of inclusion. And, as I said, I feel like I'm closer to like a Gen X sentimentality about what we used to call political correctness than our millennial and zennial cohort. But in any game you generate with the fiction, there's basic stuff to just do better writing, have more diverse NPCs that are well-rounded, unexpected. Those are simple things you can do. If you're going to use a trope, turn it on its head. There's way, because a lot of the tropes, which can be stereotypes, which are usually bad. A lot of the tropes have a familiarity to them that if you use them correctly and you make them surprising, they can reveal an insight that wasn't expected. And I don't want to make any examples because it's too easy to get in trouble. Or when you're picking out your visuals, think about, is my world all just Nordic elves, or are there other kinds of things that could be here? How can I make the world more immersive or simulative? And don't make assumptions. Just ask your players before you do things.
What it comes down to is, well, A, don't be aka also don't be a Nazi. B, just try to open up things for those that are not like you, because you know what? It's going to make the game way more interesting the more perspectives you have. So let that happen. Try to culminate that. But if you and your table can't handle that as a majority, that's probably not the table for that other person that doesn't fit into your mold. And from there, definitely with kid gloves and gentleness and lots of empathy, try to make the break.
Speaking of Nazis, for our adventure today, this time, in what is our thing called? Oh, for our adventure hook, we have a submission from our old favorite, Chris.
Hey.
And the prompt for our adventure hook here is about a corrupt leadership. So I'll read this for you. A small, unassuming town is threatened to be overrun by a corrupt leadership looking to turn the world into a corporation. Well, that sounds familiar. The tenets here are that combat is illegal. Not familiar, given that we're committing genocide on a regular basis. The second tenet is the balance of power is heavily weighted towards the opposition. That's the case for us right now. And the third one, which is my favorite in the whole world, all the characters and players are frog people. Now, to give some background to this, Chris, who I play in his 5e game, he deliberately wrote this for my benefit, clearly. Because in that game, what are the frog people called?
Grung.
The Grung. I, for some reason, love them because of the voice he does for them. I just can't get enough.
They kind of talk like this.
Yes, and they're so dumb.
Buddy. Oh, we got you. We got this covered. We've got it all figured out, buddy.
I love them, and I have spent most of my time in that game preventing them from dying and wasting many sessions trying to fix their culture.
Amazing.
Literally, I had resources I couldn't use. Because he's like, if they die, I quit. We're in the middle of like combat. Everyone's dying. I sent a bunch of priests that just drop down. They drop down and they're like, turn undead. Oh, it failed. They all died. It's like, well, fuck that. Screw that pooch. And he's like, those Grung better live. And I spent the next 3 turns, I think, trying to like Benny Hill them around.
Oh my god.
Yep. And earlier in that campaign, we went to the Frog Kingdom, and I ousted their dictator. I installed proper frog leadership. I made friends with them. I'm an archaeologist.
It was very much CIA, actually.
I was gonna say, like, you're like a true American there?
Well, no. What I did though is the people wanted it. That's the difference.
Okay.
So I facilitated what they wanted.
Uh-huh.
Passive observer. They did hate. They had Trump. Trump was their leader at the time, basically Frog Trump. But anyway, I digress. We have a unassuming town. Incoming corrupt leadership that has corporate interests. They want to turn the whole world into a corporation. No fighting. I don't know why combat's illegal, but that's the case. Balance of power is weighted against them, meaning this incoming thing is huge, and they're all frogs.
I would argue that combat is illegal in the US, essentially. When you view it as violence or even violence against belongings, definitely very harshly punished.
But is it the spirit of the thing for us to take a legal way out?
I'm just saying.
That's what you do. Don't rope us in with you.
Yeah.
We play by the rules. No. You're not a guardian.
He said combat is illegal, right? So I think what he's suggesting here is, at least for the prompt, is the solutions need to involve non-genocidal fighting and war. Like there must be, like you said, Benny Hill sort of solutions.
No, rat battles. Frog rat battles. That's going to be
dance-offs?
Or dance-offs. Okay, we're getting somewhere. All right. So where do we normally start this? I don't even remember. I usually ask, so what genre are we thinking for this?
I don't think high fantasy.
No.
I feel like almost like a alternate universe kind of thing.
With
like
frogs.
I don't, but yeah, with frogs obviously, but like Victorian or like French Revolution is kind of where I'm leaning towards.
Interesting.
And that would put us what at the end of the 18th century means what year? are we talking?
1789 to 1799. I was trying to
It's
sound
becoming
smarter.
18
So
something.
they've got like muskets and things like that, but they don't have, automated factories.
And that's what this corporation is bringing in, is what we're suggesting.
I just kind of had that vibe where it's not current time, and obviously alternate universe, but it's not current time. It's not like fantasy, or like even like feudal or medieval. It's later than that. I
And
think
everyone's frogs, including the oppressors.
Oh, everyone's frogs. Yeah, they're like, I think that maybe they're toads.
Oh, they're toads.
Yeah,
They're fatter ones.
yeah.
I do want to point out that all characters and players are frog people.
Yeah, what does
not,
that mean?
Not toads. Yeah, what is players?
How
Well,
are players also frogs?
I think it means
Player
that we're not
characters.
walking from as outsiders into a frog dominion. It's not the Grung.
Oh,
We
player
are the Grung.
characters.
The player characters. Yes.
Got it. Okay. So we've got beginning of the industrial period. Everyone's frogs. Now, just I'm trying to think about this universe, right? And it's a small town. So what is this small town that this is? And automation is the idea, like big scale production.
It's like a corporate town.
Going to become a company town. I'm wondering if it has to do with like their food supply. Like there's a ton of flies there.
Oh,
They want to do like a fly factory farm, basically.
Is that all frogs are to do? Just fly eaters? God, Courtney, I expected so much more of you.
So wait, so have the toads figure out a
The
very
frogs, Daniel, not toads.
Oh my God, hip hop battles! It's hip hop battles. They're hopping.
Oh,
but
wow.
the fat ones, right? The evil ones, the toads. So have the corporate sloths who are toads? What are they? Maybe they're bullfrogs. I don't know. What are they really? I just for some reason big and monstrous.
Yeah, no, just
I don't know.
like they're
Like
squeezing
Vogon
into those
poetry.
suits.
Yeah,
They got the spray tan on. Yeah, exactly.
Little toupees,
Oh my
like
God.
The hairdos, adult diapers.
and they have like monocles, like
Mhm.
a robber
top-
baron.
course.
Yeah,
Yeah.
little top hats. Like,
Yeah.
just a
Mini ones,
on the
yeah.
back of the head.
Okay. So they figured out some way to like mass process these flies from towns. For some reason I'm picturing like a big ass frog machine they built.
Frog machine.
It just rolls over towns.
Maybe they invented fly paper, and they're just making fly paper, so it's replacing the tongue, and then they're selling back the flies. It's basically they're fucking Nestle. They're going in, they're taking the resource and selling it back to the people that should have owned the resource to begin with.
Got it. So their giant frog fly paper machine of automation is gonna scoop up all the flies, process them, and send them back in little frog packets, like from their version of McDonald's, basically.
Yeah,
Pretty
which
much.
adds microplastics into the environment.
Mhm.
Why is combat illegal? Like, why is violence not an option in this world? I think it's an interesting challenge. I would totally be willing to skirt it, but making violence illegal is interesting. Combat or whatever you want to call it.
Maybe they had a spike in their technology with like heat detection or something. Like if you get too worked up, like there's just kill bots. Just,
The toads have killbots.
oh my God, they're practicing Toadtalitarianism.
Maybe that's what this thing is called. The toads.
You just end the episode now. Just
Can we run with what you're saying? Are frogs cold-blooded?
Yes.
So you're saying aggression has somehow been worked out of their society?
Well, I'm saying that there's some kind of overwatch to violent, like it's not only illegal, but it's punished by death penalty kind of thing. So, all right, now I'm creating mechanics before we actually have a reason for it.
maybe they just never even had a reason to develop weapons. I've seen a video of frogs fighting and they basically just like jump at each other. It's really weird. Like it doesn't look like they're hurting each other, but they are.
Do they do dance battles? Normally, that's how they resolve conflicts, by hopping around.
Maybe in our universe. Yeah, that's how they do it.
Maybe just because their anatomy, they can't actually like fight, and they can't like the bite. I mean, the toads can engulf another frog.
So really, they just like puff up their little gullets, and they hop around. They do frog battles, rat battles, frog rat battles. Though, is it gonna be rat battles that we're doing? That's what their society normally does.
Hip hoppity
Battles.
Yeah.
Jesus.
against Toadtalitarianism.
In their little small town. So it sounds like. Does that mean if their little town of the frogs and the way they resolve conflicts is rap battles, and they do it creatively, they solve, instead of beating each other up, they do rap battles, right? Does that mean that the Toadtalitarian machine that they have discovered violence, but there's no music in their world. Like, what does that mean? Because we want to have the opposite, right?
Music is an expression of individuality, and they want to snuff that out.
Yeah, or like dance. All those things have been removed from this Toad culture, and why?
Maybe dance and song is related to the culture around how they catch the flies and stuff. Like maybe there's even some mechanism for like they have lights that attract bugs to them or something as part of their battles. Yeah, like stuff like that, to gather flies. But the machine removes the need for all of that.
Mm-hmm. And so maybe totalitarian culture has been developing for such a long time that they have forgotten the old ways of catching flies. That the presence of the machines in the industry they've built, these boring Amazonian toads from Nestle, they don't remember what it is to sing songs and to dance battle because they're so bloated.
I love that you said Amazonian, which is Amazon as well. So it's all going to put in. We are world building a little bit too much, though, I think. We're starting to answer too many questions.
I think we've got a sense that we've got it's frog machine.
Clear as day in my head right now. Yeah, exactly.
Frog machine, we got toads in there. They're rolling over cities like Katamari Damacy kind of situation. The little frog town, backwater place. They still catch frogs the old way. Yeah, it's like Manhattan, Kansas. It's like, it's Nowhereville, but they're our heroes. Okay, so my next question then is, what are the players trying to do? Obviously, they're trying to save their town, but what are they trying to do?
Trying to keep the frog machine from coming to their town. Maybe it's like a Fern Gully kind of situation. Like they're trying to stop this encroaching environmental disaster from wiping out their way of life.
Or maybe it's like an Andor Fern Gully thing where they're actually trying to sabotage the machines.
Oh, yeah, that's interesting because it's coming.
Maybe they've like seen their neighboring towns fall to this thing, and they want to prepare to keep it from happening to theirs.
I'm seeing some game setup evolving because it sounds like we're from this town. We have to leave this town to confront the machine and its effects.
I have a different thought. I feel like we are coming from another town that found independence, and we are now entering this new town. We're still frog people, obviously, as players, and we are trying to help them. Well, we're almost like the Jean Valjean idea. Like we're past criminal life or something, whatever reason we're nomadic, and now we're coming to an area and we're seeing this uprising, and we decide to join and help lead it because we're the heroes. We're the adventurers.
Are we a hip hop like bad hip hop?
Oh, sure, yeah, even better.
Okay, that's what I'm checking. Yeah, like you guys have you ever seen the Instagram videos where there's a bunch of Asian dudes, they're young dudes, and they are really good at mimicking sounds.
Yes.
And so, yeah. And the guy will make the sound and they'll all go crazy because of it.
Yeah.
Is that what we're dealing with?
I think it's just one guy.
It's that one guy.
I think it's just one guy. But
because one guy will unzip a zipper, right? And then he'll make the exact same noise, and then they'll all lose their minds.
It's pretty funny. Yeah. I think we're a traveling band of bards that has seen this happening, and we get to a town, and whatever reason we get hooked into this town, and we're gonna help create the resistance to the taking over. And we do through our rap battles and our hip hopity.
Jesus.
So frog bards, are you on board with frog bards, Courtney?
Frog bards? Yeah, I'm down for it. I would say though, I feel like we don't necessarily all need to be part of this band. Like I feel like there can be resistance in the town just to avoiding a white frog savior kind of trope.
When we did session 0, when we figure out the factions, we could decide who belongs to what.
You could even have a toady who has left the totalitarian empire.
Oh, yeah.
So that leads us into our archetypes, which is answers to these questions. What archetypes would we present to represent this setting we've created?
Can we have the toady actually be with the bard group, and he's the one that handles all the tuning of the instruments? No, he handles the moving the amps and tuning the instruments, and it's a roadie. It's a toady.
I feel like there should be some sort of like journalist or propaganda type person. Some sort of person, whether they're from the town or not, but like who can kind of influence others and create writings or art related to
So someone has a sort of bardic nature, a skaldic nature, sort of.
Yeah, I do agree that having them be from the town would make the most sense. And like, I just feel like that's kind of an integral part to a lot of resistance stories is like the journalist, the person spreading the news and doing fact finding and stuff. For like the sort of empire adjacent person, maybe it's like somebody who was left behind or got separated from their team as they were going through clearing out the wilderness and taking over towns and stuff, and then kind of found themselves in the situation, and then there's a chance for them to defect.
Like a survivor.
Yeah, something like that.
Are they a frog or are they a toad?
Guess it could go either way.
Maybe toad is a state you achieve if you're in this noxious environment.
I like the idea of a possibility of a toad character that is a straight defector. Like they came thinking they knew what was right, and maybe because of their interactions with one of the other characters, depending on who the players decide what archetypes they want to do, they're like, "Oh, I'm on the wrong side of history," and they start. So they have like intel on the actions. This has seen this happen. They're like the old head.
So okay, so we have 5 or 4. We got the Rhodey, the Star, the Politico. We've got the Survivor, and then the True Defector or the Turncoat. Okay, so that's 5.
I think one more might be good. Just to
the kid, the unlikely hero, the kid.
Like a farm boy kind.
Like the character who is just part of the town, but everybody loves them because they're a good fixture of the town who decides I'm going to be part of this.
But like they're not like a folk hero. Like they're not the one people would turn to, but they're consistent and they have something special that they can contribute to this movement.
So we've got our archetypes. We have a sense of the antagonist. That specifically, we know it's that big flypaper machine. What about some scenes and nodes that we have for the players to explore? Because we know we're starting in the town, or we're coming to the town, but the players are ultimately in the town, right? So what are our seeds like? What's the progression look like for players in this?
I think a public disturbance is a good one. I actually think 2 variations on it. I think one that's more a full-on confrontation where it's like in a square or something. Like kind of think about like the Boston Massacre or something where like the toads open up. Even there's no violence, they start rapping at them. I don't know, but it's something start like
they drown out the voices or something.
Yeah, they start openly oppressing, and the players have to decide whether they act up now or regroup or whatever. And I also think of more subtle like bar scene where it's like a group of toads at a table and it's them at the other table, and there's a mild altercation or exchange of words.
Maybe the machines bring silence in some way, like because they bring law and order. So like I see at the bar, the toads, like when people are singing, when you go in there, like when the toads come in, everything gets quiet and like they just like unfurl their scroll, which has all of these regulations and bureaucratic terms they have to read that are extremely boring, and it puts people to sleep, and that's why they have this power, you know?
And the scrolls are flypaper and they actually have flies on them. They're just
Another thing with like the machine itself is like if it's crushing the wilderness, it's gonna bring silence in that way. Like literally wipes out the wildlife and bugs that are out there and stuff. So like you stop hearing the crickets at night or whatever. So that could be a part of how silence is.
I really like that.
You're suggesting perhaps like one scene could be seeing what's been done.
Yeah, like maybe traveling from one town to another to like get the word out, and like you come across a field or like a barren field that used to be this like amazing rainforest or something.
That would be a really cool downtime node with just like the just describing the absolute silence of the area.
Yeah, you could like have the players each describe one fond memory that they had of this place that now they can never experience again.
I love the progression here. So like the inciting incident, John, that you were talking about is cool. And then we've got like a more low-key infiltration with the toadies in their environment, right, in their bar. We see the devastation in a scene. We might want to have another town that they have to explore to get resources from or some secrets from.
I would say 2 in the sense that one is a destroyed town, not necessarily the one that the one archetype might be coming from, and another one that's kind of next in line.
Yeah.
Mm.
So it's like they're not actually occupied yet, but they're and maybe they're actually like maybe they doubt that the occupation's ever going to happen to them because they're tree frogs. They're not.
To get frogs. Allies. Maybe you get NPCs from them.
So you actually have to like convince them that no, they're coming for you next.
There's some opportunity for overworld play, right? Because it seems like you're managing the diplomacy of all these towns as well as you saving your own. Like as you start to sprawl out from your main town, like the the officials, the toadies are in your town. They're setting things up to turn it into a corporate town. But you need to get not just the consensus and support of your own people, but the consensus and support of all the frogs in this country, right? For it to work.
It could be another one could be like a fen with bullfrogs. And they're like the bruisers, but they're really dumb. And like you need to somehow convince them to join in you know.
And yeah, to add on to like the journalist Politico's role too, is like part of gaining this alliance or forming this rebellion could be like drafting up stories to mail out to other towns and trying to convince other people to get on your side. However that works, like coming up with messages that work for each different town that you're trying to gather.
And that could be part of managing the overworld too. Like that makes the character very important. So if it's not a player, you probably have an NPC that helps you do that too.
Yeah. Like maybe he just has like a print shop in the town that's like a location that you can like put resources into, and
I think there's like a lot of opportunity for like that overworld meta game, which could be fun part of like the actual gameplay. Do we ever encounter the actual machine, or is it only ever spoken of?
I don't know. I feel like maybe it depends on how it progresses overall. Like if you thwart it early enough and kind of drive them off before it even gets close, then
like, is that a scene or not? That's the question. Yeah.
Like it could be, depending on how the game goes.
Like, do you ever go to Toad Civilization? Are those the sort of things where we keep it off of the imagination limits of the world? Like, I would say no because it's a small town. Right?
I feel like I would want to focus just on the small towns.
I feel like if the characters playing the game wanted to do that, it's then going to change the trajectory of the game completely. And you would have to, either way, it's out of their range. Like it's actually a far away thing to get to. So it's not something that they can just do the next session. Like, and you would have to pivot that way.
Maybe what you do is you have the PC gameplay only be in the town, and you have the overworld play handle the effects of your work in the town. So like the letters get sent. You don't actually travel to the other towns. Those are all overworld scenes. Basically.
Not to the far away. You travel to the nearer ones. You get like so you have the tree frogs, you have the bullfrogs, you got neighboring ones that are very different but nearby.
You could so like if you want to adhere closely to the prompt, you could literally only have PC play be in the town, but then have the interactions with the tree folk and all their stuff be the result of messengers and stuff like that you do in the overworld. That's one way to do it. I like the idea of actually traveling to the towns though. I would prefer to go to the towns myself, but I can see if we wanted to like hew exactly to the prompt, you don't let the players leave the town, but you let the effects of their work affect the other towns.
And in that sort of situation, you could say like the town is getting locked down because of the Toad oversight here. So like you can't just leave because they'll notice and they'll probably track you down.
Because of the Toadtalitarianism.
Toge? Oh my god.
Toges? That's what they're called. They're called Toges.
Toge.
Toad, that damn Toad. All right. We got our nodes. We've got our archetypes. We know what the goal is. The antagonist seems to be distributed among various antagonists. I could see you making a BBG who's like maybe the official that's there.
I feel like you could leave that to the players too to define what the BBG is as far as what their personality type is, and just know that it's whatever is the top of the hierarchy in the immediate area.
Yeah, it could be similar to how you run Fear the Light, which is like a one-shot Wild West thing where initially like the players describe how they're involved with the antagonist and like what his qualities are. So I could see that being similar here where like you all meet up and like bitch about this one Toad, and from that you like build this NPC character.
How they scorned you personally. I love that a lot actually.
It'd be fun. I think it'd be a fun kind of like goofy resource game sort of.
Little frog tokens all over.
But then also with the combat being rap battles, like we're not getting into that. We're not getting into that. We're leaving that to their imagination. Or if someone really wants us to go back and do it, we will do it. But
I could say that's an opportunity for the GM to invent a mechanic. This is something that I'm pursuing. It's my white whale is how do I run a game where everyone is a bard or a musician of some kind and yet can use music as a mechanic in a way that is true to like having a verse or a song that works that players can do without singing. That's my white whale. We're going to twist it. So the twist is we're going to introduce a monster, change the genre, change the adventure type, or introduce story hooks. So we have to have the D4 to figure that out.
That's a 1.
1. So that's a monster. We get to do this every now and then. And unless you guys object,
though,
we can do
it. Has to be a frog, though.
Frog-like, right? We'll turn it into a frog. Somehow.
19.
It says dinosaur apex predator.
So it's a giant fucking frog.
Is it not a machine all along? Like,
And so I was thinking, is it like a genetically modified frog?
oh, their industrial work is about bioengineering.
Yeah.
I would, but going from our own history, so there is such thing as a Goliath frog, which is it's 14 inches is its normal size.
This image from a nature show or documentary has stuck with me since I was like a child. The Suriname toad is this toad that it's awful. It's like it gives birth from its back.
Ew, God,
Which is about
why?
as disgusting as you can imagine. Literally, like the babies like crawl, like worm their way out of the back.
Oh God, I'm looking at it now.
Yeah. So like we could bring in like a body horror element of that's what the frog,
I love it.
like hops in.
It's a Goliath Suriname toad.
You like think it's just like this one beefy frog that you have to fight, and then all these like little frogs pop out of its back.
Oh, and singing makes them pop, makes the thingies pop.
I don't want to play this game anymore.
It's no longer cute and fun.
No.
Oh, we did something with that monster.
I did not see that coming.
So, do we feel good about this horrific nightmare we created?
I feel great about it.
I feel like I want to get off this ride. I want to get off Mr. Toad's Wild Ride. Oh my God, it's full circle.
So, do we have any other? I mean, we're no longer safe. We don't feel included because of these horrific frogs we made.
I'm
It's a
sorry.
nightmare.
I like saw that when I was like a small child in some like Discovery Channel show. Back when Discovery Channel had like
I didn't Google it. I'm never gonna Google
Why
it.
do I still have it on my screen as well? I just have it up there. It's like bubbling frog.
nightmarish.
Oh,
like seeing
God.
that in motion
Oh, yeah.
has been in my
I'm
head
done.
permanently
I'm
since.
done. I'm done.
You're welcome.
You can follow us at OSR Plus on YouTube or join our Discord at osrplus.com. If you want to support us, visit our Patreon at patreon.com/OSR Plus for early access to our content and premium access to our digital tools.
I'm kind of thankful I have uveitis right now after blurrily seeing that shit. Jesus Christ.
Yeah, don't look up Suriname toads if you are bothered by that.
No flag is going to save you from that one.